Hey everybody, Hoosier Jedi here with another review for you. This time I'm talking about the Doctor Who episode, The Rings of Akhenaten. Um, Overall, I thought this was an alright episode, but I do have some mixed feelings about it. And my main complaint with this episode is that it really feels at times like it was trying too hard to channel some of the older Doctor Who episodes. Especially from like the David Tennant era. There would always be that moment in a lot of episodes where the Doctor would get to make a little speech, and they'd ramp up the music, and it would just be really, really super awesome. And of course, that's why the 10th Doctor is so beloved by us fans. And it's certainly not that the 11th Doctor hasn't had those moments either. He's had quite a few. It's just when we get that moment here, like I said, it just really seems like they're trying too hard. But I'll come back to that in a little while. Right now, let's just sort of get right into what's going on here in this episode. Now, it starts off with the Doctor sort of observing the meeting of Clara's parents, who apparently met in a way that is oddly reminiscent of Back to the Future, which is, I suppose, fitting enough. And of course, all this is to set up the whole, millions of possibilities and things that had to happen in order for Clara to be born and all this other stuff. And that is nicely done, but again, this sort of falls a little bit into the just trying too hard. I mean, okay, yes, this is something that is important. It does become important later in the plot later on. This is all set up so that we understand why the leaf is important. And of course, the Doctor is, of course, trying to figure out, the big mystery of what's going on with Clara. But again, the whole instilling all this potential into just one leaf, the most important leaf in human history, again, it's right there on the line of being really cool and totally in keeping with what we've seen previously, those really great moments from the other episodes, and then it takes just that one little tiny step over the line. And I don't know if I can really tangibly put into words exactly what it is. It doesn't seem to be the actor's delivery or anything like that. Everybody in this episode is doing a very, very good job. I really would guess I would have to say it just feels like the writer was trying too hard. I believe this was written by a fellow named David Cross, who, from what I've understood, is a longtime Doctor Who fan, worked at the BBC for a long time, and really just lobbied forever to try to get the chance to be involved with Doctor Who. And this is the episode where his dream apparently came true. And Mr. Cross certainly does deliver a very reasonable and very solid episode. It like I said, it just has that one little extra bit. It just goes that one tiny, tiny step too far, and that's ultimately what works against it. But anyway, again, we'll talk a little bit more about this later on. But right now, I want to talk about some of the really nice little nods to other things in here. The biggest one is we see the Doctor mention that he could come here with his granddaughter. Well, we've had Susan alluded to in previous episodes, like Dr. David Tennant's Doctor, very casually, well, like, I don't know, he did allude to Susan at one time. Here, it's the first time we've really seen Susan all but mentioned in name. And, Susan really hasn't appeared on Doctor Who since, what was, like 1983 or something like that, when she came back for sort of a one-shot adventure with some of the other Doctors. Very, very cool episode. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later on. We also get to see when Doctor is startled by the ball, he kind of goes into that martial arts stance, which is obviously meant to be a nod to the Venusian Aikido practiced by the Third Doctor. I really like that. I always sort of wondered why the Doctor never seemed to tap back into that. Now, granted, it was because part of that was because John Pertwee was a really tall guy, so he had those really sort of long, gangly legs that were well suited for doing stuff like that. Doctor doing Venusian Aikido wouldn't have been quite as plausible if you'd had a good old Sylvester McCoy trying to pull that off. And that's certainly not against McCoy, not a knock against McCoy. He was an absolutely awesome Doctor, and I think the Seventh Doctor is fantastic. But and it's just weird as the little modern the fashion sense that the Doctor is rocking now seemed to bear a little bit of influence from the Third Doctor. He's traded in that cravat for a bow tie, but I could honestly see the Third Doctor wearing that funny jacket that funny purple jacket that the Doctor has opted to go on. Let me see here. Okay, since we're talking about nods to other stuff, I liked how when the Doctor kind of goes into the temple and the door's coming down, he reaches out and he grabs the sonic screwdriver. Now, come on, folks, tell me that was not a little bit of a nod to the Indiana Jones movies and just replacing the screwdriver with the Doctor's hat. And again, tell me that the way that Clara's parents met was not obviously influenced by Back to the Future. I mean, it's just sort of a less perverted thing of what good old George McFly was up to when he met Marty's mom. But anyway. But yeah, let's talk about that scene with in the past, and this is of course again just meant to further establish who Clara is to us. Give us a little bit more of her history. Although this does seem in some ways reminiscent of what kind of some of the things that they did with Rose, how they really kind of got into her parents and all that, which, okay, ultimately I didn't really have a problem with because Rose's parents turned out to be pretty solid characters in their own right. Jackie I especially enjoyed, but again, it just seemed like they were laying it on a little thick, especially the stuff with Clara losing her mom. Now, granted, that's important to the plot. It's important, the most important leaf in human history, and what they say about potential and about how, like when they're talking with Mary about how all those things across millions and billions of years had to happen in order for her to come, and that when she's gone, there will never be another like her. Well, that's entirely true, and I like that because the Doctor and Clara are 100% right in saying those things. We are all unique individuals, and again, in the some billion years that the universe has been in existence, countless things had to have happened in order for each and every one of us to be born and to become the people we are. And they're also right that saying that when our time ends, when our story ends, there will never be another us, and that the atoms that compose our bodies, just like how they were in those stars billions and billions of years ago, will continue on. So and what the Doctor says there is absolute 100% real science. In fact, this is there was a similar speech in an episode of Babylon 5 that I really loved. I always thought that was one of the real highlights of the series. I mean, it really is amazing if you stop and think about it. How just the atoms that make up my shirt, this headset, my teeth, my glasses, these things have all been around for countless billions of years. They've been who knows what, who knows who. Some little protein or molecule of iron or something like that could have been 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago. And who knows where these things will be 10 billion years from now. If you really stop and think about it, it is so amazing. It is so mind-blowing. And it is that potential, that fundamental truth of the universe that is ultimately able to let the Doctor and Clara defeat the old god. I mean, it really is just staggering when you stop and think about it, the implications of it all. But I am getting a little off track here. Actually, since we're talking about here, there is one thing that I do like, and that is very in keeping with the tradition of Doctor Who, that I have noticed about Clara, and that's the Doctor really seems to gravitate in many ways towards companions who are involved in occupations that involve caring for people. We saw Martha, who was a doctor. We had Ian and Barbara, who were teachers. I mean, you can even make the case that Tegan fits on this. She was a stewardess. And here we have Clara, who is a nanny. So this really does, of course, I think in many ways sort of speak to how the what the Doctor really looks for, what the Doctor looks for as examples of the best in humanity, and people caring for other people. Well, the Doctor has shown time and again that this is the sort of thing that he truly, truly prizes in other people. So, in a way, that is a way of subtly signaling to us that Clara is very much a person worthy to travel with the Doctor. And of course, that's one of the things that's going on in this episode. We're showing that Clara has the chops to really be a companion. Now, last episode she certainly did pretty good there. Followed the Doctor Who companion tradition of getting captured and needing to be rescued by the Doctor. But here we see her kind of doing her thing, and she does succeed pretty well. Clara handles what's going on really well. She shows compassion towards Mary. All really admirable stuff. All very, very in keeping with many of our previous companions. And just kind of step away from that for a moment. There is one thing about this episode that, despite the fact that at times it does really seem to be trying too hard, that I did genuinely like. And all that's, of course, there's all these the Doctor's really great speech about stuff that makes us up, being around for tens of billions of years, and what Clara says about the potential in the things that matter to us. The potential of all the things, all the possibilities that could have been there if her mother had lived. Again, very beautiful. But also really beautiful, I just like that this episode wasn't really about the Doctor dealing with a monster. Now, granted, of course, it's Doctor Who, so we have to have that. But a lot of this episode was really delving into giving us the chance to do what something that Doctor Who and a lot of science fiction shows just really don't do very much, is to sort of just let us enjoy and experience some wonder at seeing other alien cultures. Now, granted, we get a very abbreviated look at what's going on with the 7 planets in the system, or whatever the heck that's all called. But the idea that, okay, their currency is based on psychometry, so the things that matter to people are what are traded as valuable. And that's a really cool idea. It's really interesting. It makes you stop and think about the various things in your life. Like, for example, this watch. Well, this watch was given to me by a friend of mine, almost 10 years ago. And I've spent countless hours wearing it. It's been with me as I've moved from place to place. And obviously it has tremendous sentimental value to me. So I look at it and I can't help but think, in a place like that, how much would that be worth? Not in terms of really dollars, but it also makes me stop and think, like, how much is that worth? I mean, not in dollars, but how much of a price, again, not money, do I really put on that? And it's really hard to say. How do you put a price on a memory? Just something worth thinking about. And when we're watching that ritual with Mary singing and all the other people, the aliens, they join in, that was genuinely a moment of beauty. The song was pretty, and just the sentiment of what was going on there, the those beings uniting together. I've always thought that really one of the most beautiful things that I have ever heard is people singing together, large groups of people singing together. And it doesn't really matter if they're singing in a language I understand, or even what it is they really are singing. I've noticed that whenever I listen to large groups of people singing together, even if it's people who aren't professional singers or even people who are particularly good at it, somehow, if you get enough people together and you get them singing together, somehow, if you can just have that, then skill and language and genre and all that don't matter. It's just somehow automatically beautiful. And I think that says something truly profound about not just people, but the universe and life in general. When beings come together as one, things of beauty happen. But anyway, so of course, this is being Doctor Who. There has to be a monster, and horrible, horrible things have to happen so that the Doctor gets to go and deal with them. And here we have an evil alien parasite sun that looks suspiciously like the creepy moon that I happened to see one time years ago in Guild Wars. And oh yeah, wait a minute. There's a song that has to be sung for millions of years, and blah blah blah, and that's what's been going on. And if the song ever stops, the god wakes up and eats everybody. Wait a minute. Oh yeah, that's Azathoth. I think that's how you say it, from the Cthulhu mythos. Yeah, okay, again, it's not that we haven't seen the Doctor dealing with critters that seem very reminiscent of H.P. Lovecraft, but, yeah, seriously, that's drawn pretty darn directly from the mythos. Well, nothing is created in a vacuum. Everything is influenced by something else, right? The old god versus the lonely god. And that was one thing that I really did like about this episode, is we see Matt Smith really tapping into some of those darker aspects of the 10th Doctor. And the 9th Doctor to some degree. His speech about the Time War and all the things he's lost, secret knowledge and all this other things. A world designed by a madman. Can't help but wondering if he wasn't talking about the Death Zone, and which was basically the creation of the mind of Rassilon. And of course, we've seen the Doctor go to other planes of reality that basically existed because they were created by cosmic entities. I mean, look at the Mind Robber as an example of that. It really just sort of depends on how much you want to read into things and kind of extrapolate from old Doctor Who. I was actually genuinely a little disappointed that this old god turned out to be that. When the Doctor called it a vampire, just for a few minutes there, I was really wondering if we weren't going to get to see some stuff that was reminiscent of the Great Vampire from the old days. But well, we kind of had the Vampires of Venice already, so I'm thinking that we're probably not going to be seeing vampires again anytime soon on Doctor Who. That's been done. But anyway, I do like that speech there. I mean, Matt Smith was really rocking that, and I love that. I mean, the actual tears rolled down the Doctor's eyes. That was great. But again, just the way it was written, and I'm just seeing that one tiny step too far. And like I said, it seemed like they were maybe trying just a little bit too hard to recapture those really great, speeches from the David Tennant era. And I really think that's about all I can really say on that one without probably just repeating myself unnecessarily. Oh yeah, I did also enjoy them having the Doctor zip around on that hover bike. Seemed a very Star Wars kind of thing to do, but what the heck, right? Let me see here. I also did like oh geez, I completely spaced out there. But I did like how this episode wrapped up with the Doctor talking to Clara about and her even basically saying, like, I'm not going to be a replacement for someone else. Well, okay, I really do think that that's important, because that's something that's sort of kind of dogged Doctor Who. I mean, that's a charge that a lot of people, for example, leveled at Martha when she first came along. And of course, Martha ended up being a really awesome companion in her own right. And now I think some people have also sort of been complaining about this and about Amy versus Clara and all this other stuff. Like, no, for the flaws in this episode, I think this episode and the show in general so far has done a reasonably good job of establishing Clara as her own person. That she's going to be playing things with the Doctor, obviously very different than Amy did, different than Martha did, different than Rose did. So I don't really think that's anything that we really need to worry about. Okay, I think I've said everything that I really have to say about this episode, and I also think that my ability to speak clearly and rationally is about over. I've noticed that 20 minutes seems to be about as long as I can be coherent in these things. So I'm thinking it might be a good time to call it. So folks, with that, as always, please comment, rate, and subscribe, and of course you can follow me on Twitter at Hoosier Jedi. Until next time, take care and have a good one.